Yeah. On South
Is
Park.
that just a larger home?
Yeah, they're moving from South Park
Oh.
to another house.
Oh, okay, got it.
Is that just a larger home? or-
Yeah.
Is that Canada?
And they're very close. It's miners too, so it'll be, we call it the cool side of the neighborhood. All you got from that side.
What side are you on, Chris?
Oh, no.
In between the cool and the...
In between.
Yep.
He's got a Corvette, so he's cool.
It is what it is, man.
No media here?
What?
No media?
No, unless they watch the live stream.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of gotten too easy to just be on the stream, so. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Call the special meeting of the council to order. At this time, I'd ask Councillor Poirier to read the blessing and land acknowledgement, please.
Thank you. Our Heavenly Father, thank you for the many blessings we enjoy in the city of Kenora. As we gather, we recognize that we are on Treaty 3 lands which are steeped in rich Indigenous history and home to many First Nation Métis people today. We continue to be thankful for the partnerships with Indigenous people. Give us wisdom in our minds, clearness in our thinking, truth in our speaking, and always love in our hearts, so that we may try always to unite the citizens of Kenora. Be with us today and guide us in our decision making. Amen.
Public information notices as required under Notice Bylaw 144-2007. The public is advised the council's intention to adopt the following at today's meeting. Adopt a budget amendment in the amount of $185,000 from the JM Roads Reserve to complete remedial work in the Coker Road, east of Kelly Road area. Declaration of pecuniary interest. I ask if any member of council wishes to declare pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof pertaining to any items as follows, either on today's agenda or from a previous meeting, or from a meeting at which a member was not in attendance. Seeing none. Deputations, we have none. Special items, budget amendment, rural road remedial work. Marco?
So the report presented today, I guess, is specific to the Coker Road just east of the Kelly Road, which is one of the locations of a few that incurred flooding and water over the road during the recent floods over the course of May. Currently, the water situation at this specific point of road is now receded, and the road is now not high and dry, but it's at least visible, and but still remains closed. So, as part of the improvements, I guess, to certain areas that were impacted by the flood, it's being recommended by administration here that one potential fix is to raise the road to accommodate future flooding. So it's being requested of council to look at a budget amendment of $185,500 is our current estimate to raise that road. So the water at the time of the flood was about 20 inches plus over that specific location. So it's quite an extensive piece of road work that's going to be required here. We're looking at probably at least a meter of raise to the road over almost 350 meters or over 1,000 feet of length of road that would need to be raised in order to make it flood resistant for the next high water levels that may be experienced in future flooding events. The other key factor here too is this would provide us a secondary way in and out in future floods. Currently right now the main routes that have been improved to date are on the East Mellick Road, which got us through the latest flood in terms of opening up properties and getting access back into that sector of the city. So this specific location here would provide us with a secondary access and egress to the northeast sector of the city in future flooding events that we've experienced as of date, or as of late. Currently, the Coker Road at this section still remains closed pending this decision. I guess there's other avenues in terms of looking at the road, but I think the long-term solution for this specific section is the grade raise itself, and that's why it remains closed to date in terms of, I guess, longer range planning for these improvements at this point in time, as opposed to bringing it back to a current standard without the grade raise and getting the road open, in a quicker fashion. So we're looking to council for this budget amendment to make a major improvement for this road and provide some better road systems out there to address and accommodate future flooding events. As an aside, I guess the other few things we have on the radar are Pinecone and Essex at Hooterville are two other key locations that have experienced either flooding and or road damage. So that would be our next focus going forward after we kind of address the Coker Road situation at this point.
And those take a little bit, they need a little bit more time for us to come up with.
Yeah, the Pinecone one, we're looking for some geotechnical investigations or support from a third-party engineer. It's failed similarly with a slip failure where the shoulder of the road is slipped down into some swampy material that gets wet when the lake rises along Black Sturgeon. So seeing the last couple of repairs that we've attempted there and failures have resurfaced again, we're looking for some better long range and more professional or engineered solutions, I guess, than just patch the road again and fix it up and with the hopes that it'll stay. So that's a longer range one. The Essex at Hooterville, it's similar to the Coker area where it's a bit lower and takes on flooding waters, but it's a much more extensive location of road, or I guess length of road. It's almost 700 meters plus of road to raise to get up to a certain standard where it would be able to accommodate future flooding events. But it's a little more extensive for sure in terms of the amount and cost of work going forward. So we'll have to come back with council for some recommendations and some options for council to review for that section there.
Council, questions, comments?
Yeah,
Council Poirier, please.
Sorry, Eric? The Essex, just so I get this straight, the Essex Hooterville, that's just what we're looking at here. It's just, it's longer, right?
Yeah,
Like
it's a much longer section. It's probably more than double what we're looking at here in terms of Coker Road to
Right.
get to a grade raise improvement. So it's much more, I guess the amount of work and the cost of the work is much more substantial than we're looking at here today for the Coker Road.
So in the meantime though, are you, like, I haven't been out there, so there was some questions about whether you could drive on?
Yeah, so we've had our road staff go and take a look at it yesterday, snap some pictures. I've taken a look at them. They've come back with a recommendation in the short term in terms of opening the road sooner than later. If we're not going to be making a decision in the near term of raising that road and making a major grade raise and improvement to that road, they've suggested some remedial works that would take maybe 2 to 4 days. Right now, the surface of that road, and unfortunately it was just surface treated last year, and looking at the photos, you would never know that it was surface treated last year. I guess with the amount of traffic and the amount of water that has sat on that road over the last month, it's really pulverized it. It looks like a gravel road at this point in time. So there's quite a few potholes in it. There's sections that are now sunken and have lowered over time here over the last month, being in a soggy, wet condition. So we would be looking at probably removing some of that surface treatment that has a lot of potholes in it, because it doesn't make sense to pothole patch it. I think it's, from the photographs I've seen, I think it's much easier to remove that current surface treating and put it back to at least a section of that location there that was affected into a gravel surface for now. And again, probably review things later on with council to come back with some more plans like we have here for Poker, do an estimate on it, kind of have some nuts and bolts figures and a scope of work that we'd be looking at for council to review. I think in the short term, it's probably best to reopen the road after maybe some quick rehabilitations here for a few days in terms of, you know, removing the potholes, getting some more gravel back on there, and making it, you know, safe for travel again and bringing it up to city standard. Seeing that this is, you know, it could be weeks before we make a decision, get estimates, and kind of culminate an action plan, whether it's going to be acted on this year or maybe it's some future plan, you know, in 2023 or beyond as a capital project for that specific section.
Thank you.
Just for clarification, Marco, that work on Essex will be done internally. So you can, once equipment and manpower is available, you can start the work if
Yeah,
that's the decision.
Yeah, we would be looking at using our own internal forces and city staff and through the roads department to bring that up to a city standard, so at least it could be reopened. Obviously, it won't be grazed for flood protection, but yeah, we'd be looking at doing those remedial measures in-house with our own road crews.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Smith, please.
Yeah, thanks for that, Marco. I appreciate that. And, you know, we had a deputation come forward, and the citizens made a really good case for a long-term strategy. And it shows we're recognizing that when people come forward, we're listening to them and we're doing what is in the best interest of the community. And I really believe that doing a more in-depth fix so it will last longer, rather than doing piecemeal and patching, is going to be better off in the end. So I think this is a good strategy, and look forward to what's going to come next. And you know, looking at the roads north of the bypass, because it sounds like there's been some issues for a while there. When we talked about the money coming out of the JM reserve, I actually even forgot we had that reserve. So that must have been kicking around for a very long time, possibly from amalgamation, would you say?
Yeah, I have to think so.
Marco?
Yeah, I'm not. I can't comment on how it developed or whatnot, but yeah, it definitely should. Seeing it's a JM's road reserve, it has to be via amalgamation around 2000, where those reserves were created and still remain.
So that must be what, when people make deputation and talk about the money from amalgamation, that must be what they have been referring to all along, right?
No, sorry, I just want to say that's not correct. And so I have had a conversation with Charlotte on that. So there was an agreement made. There was money transferred from Jeffrey Malek to Kenora at the time of amalgamation. There was a 5-year window with which that money needed to be used, and it was used. So I do want to correct that on the record, because I can't speak, and you know, I can have Charlotte dig around and get more information on the JM Roads Reserve and, you know, where that's from and how long, but I just want to speak to that issue, that the money that was transferred over at the time of amalgamation was supposed to be used within 5 years and was in accordance with the conversations I've had with Charlotte. So there's no money hanging over from 1999 that I'm aware of. Charlotte will be back next week, so I can certainly have her dig into that more. Yeah, we don't have a ton of money in roads reserves, so they're just kind of lingering. There's a Keewatin one, there's a Kenora one, there's a Kenora Highway 17 one. So yeah, I can try and get more information on sort of what the history
I'm not
is.
requesting that, but people bring that up all the time, so
sure.
that's a good clarification.
Yeah.
And it's important to note that we have these reserves for emergency work like this, so that's good use. But this reserve has now been drawn down to $65,000 once we remove this capital expense.
Yeah, and I understand that we have these reserves, and they say Keewatin and Jeffrey Malek, and et cetera, et cetera. And I understand that people still, they still hold those neighborhood values very strongly. What I would say though is, you know, we really are, you know, one city, so we don't really, you know, the money that we have in roads reserves, it's not divvied up, you know, that way. We really sort of look at it with a one city approach. So, you know, obviously, you know, the deputation made some great points, and, you know, we've had great conversations with Marco and his team about work that does need to be done in the north. We appreciate the feedback we receive from members of the public. We understand that there's work that needs to be done, you know, and just trying not to pit different parts of the city against each other. And as I've discussed with council, we are going to be, you know, taking a pretty in-depth look at our reserves and sort of just, you know, relabeling them and reconsolidating them so that, they sort of make more sense because some of the things are very specific, and some of the things do go back many, many years. We do have some things that go back to the early 2000s, and so we think it's just a good time to really do an in-depth. It's one of those projects it takes so much time, and when you're so busy with other things, you don't necessarily get to it, but we are going to take the time and get that done in this term of council. And so then we'll be able to bring that back to you and give you a better perspective of sort of what we have available for roads. But we're going to be moving away from that sort of JM, Keewatin, and Kenora listing in the reserves because, but we did feel in this case that was the best use of the JM reserve because this is directly
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
attributing to, improvements in that area.
We had to
So-
pull the money from somewhere. It was going to come
Yeah.
from reserve. So, yeah, and I agree with that, but that provides good clarity for the public who are still questioning those transfers since amalgamation. So thanks for that, Scott. Thanks, Mark.
Councillor Van Willingham.
Yeah, thank you. I was under the impression when we left the meeting the other day that we were going to raise the road, and we didn't want to put any temporary money into that road. That has changed now?
No, and that's why we've kind of held back at this point in time since Tuesday's meeting to get direction and I guess funding secured for this specific work. So right now, Coker Road still remains closed. We haven't put any kind of temporary fixes to it until we've gotten direction from council and the funding is in place, to start those grade raise works. As I think we discussed before, we didn't want to put temporary money in for a few days or a week just to find out shortly after now we're raising the road. So at this point in time, the road still remains closed because we didn't want to kind of double up our efforts in terms of a temporary fix and then shortly after, get word and the funding was in place to raise the road. So we haven't, done a temporary repair and now asking for the long-term fix and repair to happen shortly after.
And so Marco's provided, so that's on Coker, but I understand your question, Councillor Chris, because we have talked a little bit about Hooterville at Essex there.
Right.
So on Tuesday, we didn't have as much information as we have now. We've now had on-the-ground inspections and photos, and Marco's had more of an opportunity to, investigate what's going on there. And as Marco expressed, it is a much longer stretch, and as I understand it, sort of north of the bypass, this stretch is often the one that gets wet first. Even this year's been exceptional, but I understand in previous years it also does tend to be the road that the water is attracted to most. So I understand, the thinking behind not wanting to put any temporary money in when we're going to turn around and do some capital work, and we do envision getting some ideas put forward on what is the best way for us to deal with that stretch at Essex at Hooterville. We may put in some temporary money just to make that road passable as we try and come up with a plan for that. And I would anticipate that we will come back to council in 2022 with a recommendation on that stretch of road. So it's all about trade-offs. We may put in a little bit of money from operating to try and just make sure that people can get up and down that road safely while we take the time to make sure we get the right strategy, simply because we don't want to leave that stretch of road closed necessarily for months, if that's how long it takes, right? If Marco has to come back in July, potentially with a report, and then, we have to go to tender, and, then we're starting to get late into construction season. So there may be some temporary dollars, operating dollars that would go into that stretch of road anyways, either through surface treatment or through graveling, just to make sure that road can be traversable. Right now it is closed.
Correct.
That stretch of road is currently still closed, just like Coker is. So that is something that Marco and I are weighing, and I'm going to do the best that we can to make a decision operationally about what the best way to, to manage that road going forward is, because keeping it closed for another month plus may not be in the city's best interest. And so I hope that provides a more fulsome answer to your question.
The temporary work that's going to be ripped up though, and it has to be to make the road passable, but it's going to remind me of all the comments we get in the wintertime about sander coming and then the grader right behind him ripping it up and everything. We all get the comments there that it's a waste of money, cities spending is.
And I totally appreciate that point. And like I said, it's about trade-offs. What I would say, Councillor Chris, is based off the feedback that I've heard from residents in the area, I think they would rather see us put in some money into that road just to make sure that they could get back and forth to their property in a safe manner. I think they would see that as money well spent and getting a permanent or I shouldn't say permanent because this line of work can surprise you sometimes, but we're going to try and come up with the best solution that we can for that stretch of road so that it's not going to be facing the pressures from rising water levels that it has in recent years. So, you know, it's you know, there's no, really hard to thread the needle on that one. We need to take the time to make sure we come up with a good decision. At the same time, while respecting the fact that, you know, people need, you know, that road is well used. And, you know, if we need a month or two to really put a good plan together, then we don't want to keep that road closed, you know, just so we don't spend a little bit of money on gravel. And I understand that's sort of counter to what we talked about on Tuesday, but that's just sort of how our thinking is evolving as we go through here. And I have heard loud and clear from the residents in that area that they'd like to see that road reopened sooner rather than later.
Thanks.
Yeah, and it might be a couple of options. We can maybe look at something in terms of a long-term fix this year, or we can maybe look at a long-term fix maybe in 2023 via the 2023 capital budgeting process, you know, that will be coming up later this year and whatnot. So there's a couple options the city can look at, or administration can look at here in terms of addressing at least the funding for such a project. So I guess looking at work to date, this would be the 5th grade raise we'd be looking at on Coker Road. So we've done a grade raise on Anderson Road at Carlton. We've done a grade raise at on Carlton Road at Alcock Lake, and the 2 that have currently been done and completed on East Mellick Road. So this is the 5th grade raise. So we are, you know, doing quite a bit of work, quite a bit of improvements as we move along through and after the flood here. So this isn't our first you know, major improvement project that we're looking at here in terms of Coker Road. There's been 4 others to date. So you know, likely the next one, as we've all talked about, is the Hooterville. It's just a lot more extensive in terms of the other lengths and scopes and size of works that we've done to date.
So to summarize, you know, the decision that we're putting before you today is regarding Coker, and we got a good estimate on that. Wanted to talk about Hooterville and Pinecone for 2 reasons. I want you to know that those are 2 roadways that have been directly impacted by the flooding, and we have not lost sight of them. And I want members of the public and the media to hear that those are in our thoughts, and we are still working on those. Outside of Coker, Hooterville, and Pinecone, we do also realize that there's work that needs to take place north of the bypass, but we are going to take some time to evaluate and come up with a plan for specifically the north. And we will start, you know, we will come up with that plan, and then, you know, that'll be part of the capital budgeting process, and it'll be part of work that we do in the north in future years starting in 2023 and beyond. So those roads that have been directly impacted by the flooding, we're going to prioritize those. We realize that we also need to figure out other priorities in the north, so we will take the time to do our homework and make sure that we set priorities that make sense, and we allocate budget dollars accordingly. And you know, I hope that you know, obviously a lot of emails over the last month from residents in the north, and so I hope that message, the grade raises that we've already done, the grade raise that we're going to do here at Coker, spending more time on Hooterville, at Essex, and Pinecone. We did also get great news yesterday, and I know that Heather was able to send this out. Finally, we're able to get approval for that disaster relief funding for residents. So that is now open. That program has been activated by the ministry, and so residents will be able to activate that and potentially seek dollars for issues. Important to note, the program is not meant to replace insurance. So insurance still, you know, will factor in there, but for those costs sort of not covered by insurance, there is disaster relief programming there. So all of that said, and adding on, you know, the work that we're going to do on a roads needs study to come up with a 5-year strategy up in the north. I hope that the north recognizes that we hear them, and that we are putting the work in to try and address their concerns.
Okay, call for resolution number 1, please.
Resolution number 1, your worship, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Van Wallingham, that council hereby approves a budget amendment in the amount of $185,500 to be funded through the JM Roads Reserve Fund to rehabilitate the Coker Road just east of Kelly Road by way of a grade raise to accommodate future flooding events, and further, that in accordance with notice bylaw number 144-2007, public notice is hereby given that council intends to amend its 2022 capital budget at a special meeting of council on June 10th, 2022, to withdraw funds from the JM Roads Reserve Fund in the amount of $185,500 to complete this work, and further, that council gives 3 readings to a bylaw to amend the 2022 capital budget for this purpose.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Resolution number 2.
Resolution number 2, your worship, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Van Wallahan, that pursuant to section 239 of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended, authorization is hereby given for council to move into a closed session at 9:24 a.m. to discuss items pertaining to the following: 1, disposition of land; 1 matter, Keewatin Medical Center.
Okay, we need to hold off.
Just 1 second. Point of interest, there should be a bylaw, a resolution. Is that not, you don't have a council? Okay, so I just need a mover and a seconder to move a bylaw. So the following bylaw be now read as a first and second time and approved in its present form and presented for third and final reading. Number 79, 2022, budget amendment, remedial work for road flooding.
It's moved by Councillor McMillan and seconded by Councillor Chase.
Thank you.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. I won't ask you to reread.
You won't?
And so, can you change that to number 3, please, Councillor?
Thanks, Marco.
Thanks, Marco. Okay.
Thanks, Marco.
And who seconded it, Mark?
Chris.
Could you initial that? So please, Chris. Wherever Mark changed the number. Thank you.
Thank you.